My sisters bullied me for my entire life. Now that I'm older, it seems karma's coming to get her. Let me tell you exactly what I'm talking about. Deep down, I always hated my sister. It all started way back when I was born. The thing is, I came as a surprise to both my parents and my sister. They've been living their perfect little father, wife, daughter, nuclear family dynamic for 8 years, until I came along. I've always felt like they only wanted one child. This definitely showed, as even though I was the younger child, they still preferred my sister. By preferring my sister, I mean it was mostly my mother, as my father was always working and barely had any time for us. Because my mom only wanted a girl, it meant that she was colder towards me and justified everything that my sister did, even if it was horrific. Now, my sister herself was not really right in the head. She did not have any mental issues or anything, but she was extremely cruel. Because she was such a spoiled brat for 8 years, and my parents were not that responsible, they suddenly forced her to take care of me. And she did not like that. Anytime she would have to spend time with me, she would take out her anger on me. My mom and dad were outside the house a lot on work, date nights, and they traveled a lot. So if we did not have a babysitter, my sister would be the one to take care of me. And it was hell. She would beat me up, forget to feed me, call me names, force me to watch whatever she wanted, and even take away my toys for fun. Of course, I was just a child, so I was not completely aware of what she was doing. But I was very, very upset all the time. Every time my parents left the house, I would be utterly terrified of what she would do next. Whenever we had guests over or a birthday party, she would always intentionally embarrass me in front of everyone and even blow out my candles and laugh. She was ruthless. And what's worse was that she did not have any friends and barely had anyone in her life. So she was completely free to bully me. It went on like this for years. During her teenage years, she moved from physical assault to just ruining everything I ever wanted. For example, she would make up stories about things I did so that my mom and dad would punish me. She would embarrass me in front of my friends and send out rumors at school, as we were both going to the same school now. If she was a physical bully when I was a child, then she would be a manipulative, psychological bully when I was a teenager. When she finally finished school, I was still in middle school, but I hoped she would just go off to college and leave me alone. But no, she decided not to go to college and just work minimum wage jobs. This made her life even more miserable and made her take it out on me even more. In my mid-teens, she would keep sabotaging any event or outing I wanted to plan. Every time I told my parents, they would just tell me that she's joking around, and they never took me seriously. My teens reached the pinnacle of my hate for her, as I simply could not stand the sight of her anymore. When I was around 17, I finally decided to fire back. I played her game back to her and got her fired from her job working at McDonald's. She never knew who got her fired, but she was jobless for a few months. So she did have more time to start messing with me even more. At one point, when my parents were traveling, she invited a bunch of people from school over, who weren't even her friends, and had them stay in the night, and I was forced to find somewhere else to sleep. In another situation, she took my phone that had my alarm, so I would wake up late and miss my final. This caused me to take summer course, and I missed out on the family vacation that she, mom, and dad went on. I never really knew why she hated me so bad, as it's not like having to take care of me when I was a child was such a burden. When I finally finished high school, I decided to go to college and then straight to law school afterward. This was in another state, so I had 7 full years with barely seeing my sister except for holidays, and they were the best 7 years of my life. Apparently, things weren't going so well for her, as she kept jumping from job to job and still stayed at our parents' house. Anyways, I decided to stay out of state after finishing law school to become a lawyer. This meant that I had barely any contact with my parents or my sister, until Thanksgiving 2 years ago, when I had to go back and meet everyone. It was the first time the entire family had gathered in months. I barely kept up with my parents and had no idea what my sister was doing. So I was extremely surprised to see that they showed up with a husband. Her husband was a good 20 years older than her, and he clearly only married her to be a trophy wife. It was obvious she only married him for his money. He was loaded, not just because of the Rolls-Royce keychain he would flash everywhere. They both showed up in extremely expensive clothing and were immediately the center of attention from everyone. The whole night, she went on about his extreme implausible love story and how they met and instantly got married because they saw each other as soulmates. I knew her long enough to know she was lying, and she was not fooling anyone. During the night, she suddenly started targeting our cousins, my mom's brother's daughters. My mom's brother was a simple teacher, so the entire family was not rich, but they were well off and lived normal, simple lives. My sister always hated our cousins because they were prettier and more popular in school. Both cousins were not married yet and worked minimum wage jobs. This made them the perfect target for my sister, who suddenly kept asking them embarrassing and personal questions about their money, jobs, love life, and future. Eventually, she just started making fun of them and berating them. This caused quite a stir, and other family members quickly came to our cousin's defense. My wife's husband was quiet, and she clearly had him around her little finger. Every time someone got back to her, she would tell them they were poor and jealous of her. She kept listing the amazing vacation spots her husband took her on and the super expensive stuff he bought her. She even kept flashing around her big old diamond ring and jewelry bling in front of everyone. It was very, very uncomfortable. I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. After she fought with every single member of our family, she turned back to me and my parents. She told us about how she hated living in the house and how much she hated me and the fact that I came to mess up her perfect childhood. Even though my parents always put her first, she also attacked them and told them that she wished she had rich parents who had nice stuff, lived in a nicer house, went on nicer vacations. At that point, I could see the heartbreak of my parents' face. Even if they were not all that attentive anyways, after that bombshell, the entire house went quiet, as my sister and her husband excused themselves, telling us not to invite them for the next Thanksgiving. We spent the next couple holidays without them, and there was such a rift that my parents barely even bothered to call her. Strangely, they started giving me more attention, like calling me several times, or inviting me to come over frequently. It was nice, but felt about 20 years too late, as I'd already set up my life elsewhere and did not even need them. I was doing very well as a lawyer, and my family was like ancient history to me. I have not heard from my sister for 2 years at this point, and I was glad. Still, all that peace of mind eventually came to an end, when I suddenly found her at my door in the middle of the night. Once I opened the door, I found her crying and breaking down. Her makeup was all messed up, her clothes were ripped in a mess, and she was barely making any sense. I never saw her like that in my entire life. It was like she was a completely different person. She suddenly threw herself into my arms, but I gently pushed her away. We were never close enough for her to hug me. I honestly did not even want her inside my house, let alone at that time. Before she even explained anything to me, I felt good. I'd always wished to see her cry. I got my wish. I was being cold towards her, and the only reason I did not kick her out then and there was just to hear what happened. Not that I was much interested. She told me that a huge fight happened between her and her husband. It started a few months ago when they decided to have a child and tried several times. However, there was no success. They kept thinking that they just needed to try again, until they were so hopeless, they went to a doctor to do a checkup. The husband tested first, came back to be normal. Apparently, she was hesitant to do the checkup, but her husband kept pressuring her until she finally did it. The results came back while they were having dinner with her husband's family. Turned out it was her fault. She was infertile. That night, her husband lost it and humiliated her in front of his entire family, shaming her for being infertile and not being a real woman. In his fit of rage, he told her that she was worth nothing to him anymore if she could not give him a child, and kicked her out in front of the whole house, and did not even let her take her clothes or her bag with her. This happened 2 days ago. Next, she told me the next day she arrived home and went to our parents' house. She begged them to let her in and help her, but she remembered what she had said to them on Thanksgiving and refused to let her in after yelling at her and telling her they never want to see her again. After she was rejected by her parents, she hitchhiked all the way to my state to come visit me, as I was the last hope. A part of me kind of wanted to help her and felt bad. But I could not let go the thoughts of the past and how she traumatized me in my entire life, making my childhood an absolute living hell. I know that forgiveness in the face of tragedy is good, and that anyone can be redeemed, but I simply could not get myself to be nice to her. I gave her some food, enough cash to stay in a motel for a day, but told her she's not welcome at my house, and I don't want to help her or see her ever again. She begged and apologized for everything she's ever done to me, but an eye for an eye, I told her to leave. After 2 days, I got a call from my parents, telling me to come over, that it's important. I was sure it had something to do with my sister, so I kept delaying until they kept pressuring me to go. Eventually, I went there and found my sister at my parents' house. This was surprising since they kicked her out before she came begging. Apparently, after I kicked her out, she stayed in a motel for a day, then went back to my parents to literally beg them to take pity on her. Eventually, my parents caved and let her stay for only a couple of nights to see what, I don't know, may say or will be of the matter. My sister explained to all of us what she and her husband are getting a divorce, but that her husband's refusing to pay a dime to her. She's upset and hurt by the fact she won't get any money, and it's only because she did not give him a kid. Her husband's very rich, and more importantly, he's very powerful with a lot of connections. I would have been scared to go toe-to-toe with his lawyers if I weren't even wanted the case. I knew this was a losing battle to begin with, but that wasn't the reason. Although she was at her lowest point in life, I still could not forget what she did to me my entire life, so I refused to take the case. Even my parents were slightly surprised, but I had no more naivety to give her. She told us without this money and our support, she'll literally live on the streets without anyone to go to. To be honest, I simply did not care. The scars I have on my body from our childhood will never go away. That night, the rest of our family heard about what happened and came over. I thought they were coming over to discuss this and see the options. It was completely different reason. They did not even want to listen to her or cared what happened, as they literally just wanted to gloat. Our cousins absolutely humiliated her to the point of crying. They made fun of her for being homeless, infertile, poor, having no possible future whatsoever, and it was better to just not exist. The family sat by as our cousins got their revenge. After they were finished, the rest of the family joined in on the degrading party and completely tore her apart psychologically. My sister did nothing but cry the entire time and had absolutely no energy to respond or defend herself. Even my parents did not comment, as they could not shake the harsh words she told them before. At this point, it was the perfect opportunity to talk all about what she did to me as a child. All the abuse, bullying, manipulation I received. While my parents just always ignored it when we were kids, they finally believed me and just could not believe their ears. They even apologized for not listening sooner. After a few hours of complete humiliation, our family told our parents to kick her out, and they did. We did not know what she would do or where she would go. We simply did not care. I thought that my sister would go to my senior lawyer friend, whom I've known since school, for help. He was always very kind, and although she hated me, she liked him. He lived in the city, so he was close enough for her to go to. I had to be quick, so I called him on the phone to explain the whole situation to him, and he should not take her case. To my surprise, she was literally waiting in the waiting area in the firm to talk to him. He tried to convince me to sympathize and be the bigger man, but it was way past time for that. I told him that if he wanted to continue being friends with me, he would not take her case. After some arguing, he said okay and he would let her out. The last person I needed to call was her husband. I told him that he would not be suing and that he could do whatever he wanted, but that he was still a bad person for what he was doing. I made sure he knew that if it were any other person than my wife, I would have gone after him hard at court, but because of the complicated relationship between me and my sister, I was going to let it slide. He told me that he doesn't even care about her anymore and that he already's gotten married to someone else that morning. A man like him cared little for love, only for self-interest and gain. Well, a couple years passed. I've almost forgotten about the whole shebang. It was Thanksgiving Day again, and so I was going over to my parents' house. Of course, my sister missed the last two Thanksgiving. We had absolutely no clue what happened to her or where she went. All of a sudden, all of her social media profiles were deleted. It was like she was a ghost. On my way to my parents' house, I stopped near a bar, where I took a minute to look at the sights. Inside, I saw a woman, beaten up with rough clothing and sitting on the floor counting change. I tried to focus, and to my surprise, it was my sister. She had become completely homeless, sleeping in parks, begging for money on the street. We made eye contact for a split second before I went back to my car and drove off. What goes around comes around. Alright guys, so this story was an emotional roller coaster. What I want to know from you guys, tell me in the comment section down below, at any point in this story, did you feel bad for the sister? I would love to hear your opinions on this, so drop those down below. If you're new here, just know we read stories every single day. Consider subscribing. It really helps support the channel and I appreciate it so much. The next story that we're going to look at today is titled, Am I the A-hole for telling mother-in-law that while I cannot break HIPAA, but I can dictate how much she sees her future grandchildren? I'm an emergency room nurse. I also have a terrible relationship with my mother-in-law. She came into the ER on Valentine's Day, and I went into the room, and she immediately demanded a new nurse. To be fair, I was about to suggest she got a different nurse, because in general, we don't work with family. But she was super rude about it and said I was incompetent. The real issue is mother-in-law was with a date. This man is a family friend. He was actually father-in-law, her very, very recent ex-husband's best friend for 20 plus years. My husband despises this man and would have had a strong reaction to her dating him. Mother-in-law's dad had a business falling out with him and there were multiple lawsuits. His kids don't like mother-in-law, so to say people would flip shit if they found out they were dating is an understatement. I absolutely cannot tell anyone due to HIPAA. I can't even mention to my husband that I saw her, and it's stressing me out so badly. Mother-in-law reminded me of HIPAA at the hospital, and I reassured her that I would never risk my career like that. Mother-in-law laughed and said she knew it was going to drive me crazy and she was loving it. This morning, she texted me that she was just reminding me that she knows her legal rights and she will destroy my life if I tell anyone. I wrote back again that I won't tell. I asked her if she was ever going to tell her son, and she wrote back, maybe if we get married. I told her she was a crappy mom, and she said that she hardly ever sees him since he was married to such a jerk. So it's not an issue. At that point, I felt like she was just goading me, because she must know it kills me to not be able to tell him. I wrote back, I cannot break HIPAA, as she clearly is aware, but I can dictate how much time she spends with future grandkids. So maybe she should call me no names, and just maybe she should fess up to her son. Mother-in-law wrote back that she has no intentions of having a relationship with my children anyways, but then said the fact that I said she shows what type of person I am. And since I'm a trash person, she doesn't even want to meet my future children. I don't know if I went too far with what I said. I do believe this is one of those very vile mother-in-laws. Let's read a comment. You need to go to your HR, let them know what's going on. Tell them your mother-in-law came in with a date and is now threatening you with HIPAA. Even though you've done nothing and told no one, that you have no intention to, this needs to be on record in case she decides to mess with you more. You could maybe even screenshot, print out where she's threatening you with it. I think this is wonderful advice. Let OP know in the comment section down below, what would you do if you were in this situation? Guys, that's all the stories for you today in this video, but tune in tomorrow because there's going to be plenty more. Thanks so much for watching, you guys have a great day, and I'll see you later. The latest Mr. Reddito producer, Christine Billings. Thank you so much for the support.